Well, that Donald Trump debate, of course, opens up wider issues about overall censorship. The online magazine Spiked says it's found that 90% of British universities and students' unions censor speech in some way, rising from 80% last year. So are we becoming a nation too keen to shut people down? Well, I'm joined by Spike's deputy editor, Tom Slater, and also by the writer, Tim Doble. Very good to talk to you. Well, let's start with what Spiked has found out first of all. This 90% of universities censoring things in some way, shape or form, that is mainly students' unions, is it?
It is 100%. While censorship is something which is endemic throughout the university sector, universities certainly can't wash their hands of it. We do find that student unions on average are 4 times more likely to censor speech. Everything from offensive speakers down to apparently offensive sombreros. It's really hitting epidemic proportions.
Yeah, and rugby clubs and newspapers and all kinds of things.
Precisely. It just seems as if the bar for censorship on campus is getting lower and lower, where in the past it was very clear it was about effectively political enemies, it was about the fascists and the far right. The logic of censorship has only spread. Now it seems like there's almost nothing you can't say, nothing you can't wear almost that won't get you in trouble with the campus speech police. So it's a really growing problem.
All right, Tim Doble, do you think it's gone too far?
No, not actually. I think that students should be the ones making these decisions, and as a recent graduate, I don't think I would have had half the experience I've had if we weren't all allowed to say what we wanted without fear of violence or hatred. I certainly wouldn't want some sort of homophobe coming and make a speech at my university, or someone completely racist or transphobic, anything. I think we should be listening to the minorities and what they have to say about this.
But does that mean you just want to stay in your own personal comfort zone all the time? There are some nasty things and unpleasant people out there.
Well, I'm clearly not averse to a debate. I think that free speech is probably the greatest thing about this country, or living in this country anyway. It just means that people in minorities have a chance to speak for themselves instead of having to listen to the same old tripe over and over and over again. Just like Donald Trump, we shouldn't have to listen to him say, oh, ban all Muslims from America, and then say, oh, welcome on into our country and say whatever you please. It's not fair.
Yeah, but Tom, the answer to that is well, you don't have to listen to him, isn't it?
Well, precisely, but not only do you not have to listen to him, I think students, whether they're from a minority or anything else, why are we suggesting that just by accident of your birth somehow makes you more vulnerable? You should be encouraged to argue back. I think my 2 main problems with censorship, first of all, that if we do value free speech, it has to be indivisible. It's for all, or if it's for none at all. And I think the second thing is that if you're really serious about challenging prejudice, censoring bigots is the worst thing you can possibly do. It gives their views a glamour they don't otherwise deserve. Censorship has a great knack for letting bigots think that they're onto something, and it effectively just buries our head in the sands. It stops us locating those views, arguing against them and discrediting them in the public forum. Censorship makes these problems worse, not better.
Yeah, Tim Doble, isn't it better developing your arguments against those that you disagree with?
Yeah, sorry, I'm afraid I think that sounds a little bit victim-blaming. I don't think we should say, oh, students or minorities are too vulnerable to listen to this. I think we should really be looking at the actual perpetrators of this hatred. Why on earth would we accept that in a university, a place of learning and a place of acceptance? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm sure Tom would say this, Tim, but it's a question of degrees, isn't it? You talk about hatred when some things are just a little bit uncomfortable.
It really depends on the topic then, doesn't it?
All right, so Tom, do you go along with that? Do you think that, you're saying it, that people are a bit too quick to take offence, and is it manifested nowadays more and more in social media?
Well, I think social media certainly plays a role, but I think the fact that from the Donald Trump phenomenon through to student politics shows that this is quite widespread. But to take up this idea that I'm alleging that people from ethnic minorities such are so much more vulnerable, the opposite is true. I'm saying they're robust enough to engage in these debates with all the rest of us. There's a really kind of ugly neo-colonial aspect to all of this, where you have white middle-class students saying that they're trying to protect these poor, wretched minorities from offence. It's ugly, it undermines their autonomy. I think we're all robust enough to engage in free debate. That goes for everyone.
Yeah, let's characterise it then, Tim. Would you think it would be wrong to get an avowed white racist to debate with members of ethnic minorities at a students' union?
That really depends. I would let the ethnic minorities say whether they wanted that or not. Because I'm not from an ethnic minority, I am from a minority, which I think gives me a bit of a say on whether I want someone totally homophobic coming to my university and having a go at us for living the way we want to live or being who we are. I don't think we should be saying that minorities are weaker. I'm certainly not saying that at all. Quite the opposite. I agree. When it comes to people admiring people like Donald Trump or Jermaine Greer, who have said completely controversial things, mainly down to their own sense of self-importance, I just don't think we should be exposing that to all university students. And a lot of them are capable of just absorbing this way too much.
Tom Slater, I mean, democracy in action, as you say, it's mainly students' unions. Presumably a lot of votes have taken place. It's up to the students themselves to decide.
Well, I think it is up to the students themselves to decide. I just think they shouldn't be deciding in this way. I'm just trying to persuade them. But I think the problem with this argument is that the comments you've just heard there are the exact mirror image of someone like Donald Trump. First of all, because it's intolerant, it suggests that certain views shouldn't allow to be aired. But second of all, because it relies on this view of the blob. Donald Trump thinks that all Muslims are potential terrorists in waiting. Censorious students think that there's a kind of white, perhaps working class mob out there who'd be switched onto these ideas the moment they hear them. So effectively, I see the mirror image of the same intolerance. If you believe in free speech, it means you believe in people to make up their minds. And it's that kind of humanism which is so sorely lacking at the moment.
OK, you've got to come back on that, Tim Doble.
Yeah, I really have, I'm afraid. That type of intolerance is just completely opposite. It's just so not the same. I'm not saying that everyone shouldn't have their free speech. That's totally fine. It's when it borders on inciting hatred and violence, and it's sort of like saying, would you allow someone who advocates rape to a group of university students who may include rape survivors? Why on earth would you want them to experience that? You would let them say whether they wanted to or not.
And you've got to come back on that very briefly, Tom Slater.
Well, I think first of all we're blowing this entirely out of proportion, but also I think what we're completely ignoring here is that whatever minority throughout history, it's through reaching for free speech, through trying to exercise it themselves and liberate themselves, that people have freed themselves. Frederick Jameson, the famous anti-slavery campaigner, said that if freedom of speech existed for one day in the US, it would break every chain in the South. We've gotten away from that liberatory spirit, turned it into this paternalistic censorship. That needs to stop.
OK, sorry we're out of time, but thanks for debating it. Tom and
you.
Tim, Slater and Doble, very good to see you. Still to come on